Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Sher, and it's time to square off. We have quite a bit to talk about. Let's introduce our panel. First of all, WBAL super journalist Jayne Miller. She's heard on BAL Saturdays from 11 to 1. The next day on Sundays on WBAL from 7 to 10 a.m., you have Jerry Rogers, our Republican National Committee woman, Nicolee Ambrose, looking great and always back to talk. And finally, our legal mind. Welcome, Chris Kennedy. Hi, everybody. Let's get to it. Guilty on each of the 34 felony counts in Donald Trump's hush money trial. Trump goes down in history as the first time a former U.S. president has been convicted. Stand by here. I've got 2 pages sticking together. First time a former president of the United States has been tried and convicted in a criminal case. Your reaction? Let's call on our GOP committee woman, Nicolee Ambrose. What did you think when it came down that way, Nicolee?
Well, every Democrat, Independent, and Republican in America should be extremely concerned that Pandora's box has officially been opened. May 30th of this year will officially go down as the day our constitutional republic was turned into a banana republic. And, you know, people just have to realize if this can happen to a former president, it can happen to you.
Very interesting. Chris Kennedy.
Richard, Teddy Roosevelt, in his third State of the Union address 121 years ago, coined a very popular phrase, and that is, no man is above the law. That was proven true this week, where Donald Trump was actually held accountable for the first time in his entire walled-off bubble world life.
Really? Jayne? What's on?
I mean, you could hear the divide over this, you know, that the one side thinks this was bogus charges, et cetera. The other side thinks that, you know, it's about time he's held to account. I think the bigger question is what now? And as we go forward, you know, the big question is, you know, is the country prepared to elect someone who's a convicted felon? I mean, look, he's convicted. It's on the record. It happened. They put the case to trial. A jury found him guilty. Took 9 hours to deliberate the case. So it is what it is. Obviously, there are going to be appeals and all that kind of stuff. He's got to be sentenced. But, you know, going forward, this becomes it's a political question. This is a political question. And that is, what impact does it have on the 2024 race? You know, I just think because Donald Trump is not in office and he's an individual and it's 6 months from whatever it is, 5 months, whatever, from the election, I just don't agree that this is, you know, something that if it can happen to him, it can happen to anyone. That's true in any case. And, you know, the other side of that is, you know, if they have evidence that a crime was committed, what do you want to do? Look the other way?
They do.
All right, Jer, what do you think?
Well, look, I think Jayne is right. It's a political question, always has been, which is why this never should have come to pass. This was a political persecution, not prosecution. And in terms of the crime, you know, Christopher, there was no crime. Even the prosecution wouldn't identify the crime. The judge in his instructions wouldn't identify a crime. Remember, the so-called process error of mislabeling the entry, that's a misdemeanor unless it's connected to an underlying crime. The prosecution never said what that crime was. And so this really was a convoluted. Reason magazine, which is no supporter of Trump, said that this turns justice on its head. This was a convoluted, at best, legal theory, that due process was denied. And again, I'm someone who's a civil libertarian. To Nicolee's point, this does make it easier to violate the civil rights of other Americans. Look, we're in Baltimore City. This idea that that civil rights can be violated is something that's I think about all the time. And if they can do it to a billionaire former president, You know, what about the son of a single mom living in West Baltimore? I mean, this is a dangerous precedent. It's smashed norms. It's going to be reversed on appeal. And unfortunately, what's going to happen here is Donald Trump should be held accountable for his policies, for his personality, for things. But that's for the people to decide. Not a prosecutor who's been politicized the legal system. And also remember this. We're going to find out later that the Biden administration had a big role to play in this, which is very, again, this is like Putin's Russia. Everyone wants to say Trump is Putin's puppet. In a sense, you know, what did Joe Biden do here? The third ranking official at DOJ left the DOJ, Biden's DOJ in 2022 to be the prosecutor on this case. And this is, I mean, again, this is politics.
Richard,
No,
I'm gonna
go ahead. Go ahead, Chris.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with my colleague Jerry on that. It's an FBR case. It's a falsifying business records case. There's been plenty of those. I'll grant you.
It's a misdemeanor.
Hang on, Jerry.
But Chris, it's
Jerry,
a misdemeanor.
Jerry, if you don't mind,
all right.
Appreciate it. I'm going to start over. Okay, it's a falsifying business records case. Okay, there have been plenty of those. I'll grant you that this is the first time it's been bootstrapped to achieve the felony connection. I'll grant you that this is the first time. And I don't know whether that'll hold up on appeal since it's a case of first impression. We don't know. But here's what I'm going to say. Trump is going to get a financial bump out of this. Okay, what impact it has when early elections begin in only 3.5 months in some states, I don't know. Apparently, the latest poll says 7% of his base would not vote for him if he were convicted here. And that's small. That's nothing. But it's a case. It is an election of razor thin margins, even more so than the last two. Look at Wisconsin. When Trump won Wisconsin in 2016, he won it by 22,000 votes. That's the size of the University of Richmond football stadium. Okay. Biden in 2020 won it by 20,000 votes. That's even smaller. That's the size of a soccer stadium in Austin, Texas. Okay. They are razor thin margins in about 7 states. And those people are going to decide who the next president is. So we need to go talk to folks living in Bucks County if we want to know what's going to happen in Pennsylvania, et cetera. So I don't know that this is going to make a whole lot of difference for people that are undecided. I will say that the news cycle, which is now a everyday minute by minute thing, there's a lot of news cycles that are going to happen between now and early voting in November. And I don't know what was going to be happening by then. But I will finally say this. I don't see Donald Trump ever setting foot inside a jail cell. On its worst day, I see him spending 6 months or less in home confinement at Mar-a-Lago.
Really?
I would agree with that.
I've been watching.
I agree, Chris.
Go ahead, Nicolee. I've been watching.
So let's just delve into something that Jayne said and something that Chris said and tie it up with what Jerry said. Okay, so Jayne said it's political. Absolutely right. This is a political use of our criminal justice system on an issue that should never have been a criminal matter. To Chris's point,
no, that's not what I meant.
I know it's not what you meant, but it is a political use.
No, that's not what I meant. Right.
So,
okay. I'm not saying this was a political prosecution.
To Chris's point about, oh, well, he was convicted on documents or what have you. No, we actually don't know that because the judge, and let's go on about Judge Merchan for a second. He violated Andres versus the United States, a basic 1948 court case that most Americans might not know the year and what case it was, but pretty much all Americans, if you talk to them on a street, understand that a jury is supposed to be unanimous in their ruling, which they were definitely not in this case. They were, in fact, instructed in violation of American jurisprudence to not need to come to a unanimous decision, which will, of course, make problems on appeal for the state's ridiculously weak case that no federal jurisdiction would bring up the charges on. And let's go on a little bit more about Judge Merchan. He donated to Joe Biden. He also, his daughter worked for a firm that raised over $93 million on the convict Trump case, and yet he refused to recuse himself. All of this is just an outrageous show trial in the style of Soviet Russia, in the style of Brazil and Peru. All of these people that have fled to America because they did not want to live in a banana republic came here to escape this. This is a travesty, and all Americans should be embarrassed.
All right. We'll get to Jayne. Jayne, hold on 1 minute. Judge Juan Merchan has set Trump's sentencing date for July 11th. The guilty verdicts are punishable by up to 4 years in prison. In the short term, at least, there were immediate signs that the verdicts are helping to unify various factions as GOP officials in Congress and in state capitals across our country rallied behind Donald Trump while his campaign is benefiting from a flood of new fundraising dollars. All right, Jayne, pick up wherever you'd like.
Well, I just want to give the other side of the story here. I think that this is a testament to our system, that someone of Donald Trump's prominence as a former president, and again, when he was prosecuted, he's a citizen, but that he can be prosecuted, put on trial, go through the process, have a jury of people that hear the case, etc. I mean, I don't see this as any of what Nicolee has said. I mean, I think this is our system. This is the whole system that we have. And if we're going to say that certain people can't be put through that system, that's the problem. You know, it's right. If this can happen to him, it can happen to anyone. That's right. It can. And we have seen many white collar cases that, can make the same argument. If it can happen to you or to them, it can happen to you. This, to me, this is a testament to our process and our system that we can go through with a prosecution like this, regardless of the outcome, that this case can go to trial. I think that is a real testament to the process.
So let me give you an example of why this is not a normal case that normal people would have to worry about. So it should involve the Federal Election Commission, right? They're trying to say, in the closing arguments, the prosecution tried to say that Donald Trump's $130,000 payment in checks noting legal fees to one of his lawyers was influenced the election. Well, guess what? The Federal Election Commission loves to go after people for any little thing, any candidate running in our US federal system of government. Okay, they repeatedly chose not to because on the merits, this clearly had no merit. And so instead, Biden sends his number 3 at DOJ to some dinky little prosecutor's office in the state to run a trial because Alvin Bragg campaigned on getting Donald Trump. He can't possibly prosecute actual criminals in New York City, but he can go after someone on what they're essentially claiming was a FEC violation that the FEC refused to go after. So no, the whole point of this is, I hate to use the word, trumped up charges. This is terrible. That if our federal government refuses to prosecute something because it's a non-issue and doesn't apply, that any dinky state court where you can get a predetermined verdict will choose to run with it. And
Right.
it's embarrassing.
I got Chris, you're next. You're next right after we thank the sponsors who make this show possible and provide you all with very handsome salaries. Or at least, my friendship. Howard Allison, the voice of
Thank you, Richard. Richard and I are proud to represent the law firm of Barry Glazer. Barry always goes the extra mile for his clients, whether it's been a personal injury, medical malpractice, or nursing home neglect. Barry and his staff, that includes an in-house doctor, make no apologies for getting top dollar from the insurance companies. His clients are his best advertising. So next time you need a lawyer, give Barry Glazer a call at 410-547-8568. He gets results. Tell him Richard Sher sent you.
Sure.
And for special occasions, group get-togethers, or just date night, Pappas restaurants and sports bars belong on the top of your list. Enjoy their award-winning crab cake, or as Richard calls it, the fab cake, and a great selection of steaks, seafood, and other mouth-watering treats. Pappas is Oprah's favorite, and they ship their crab cakes all over the country. 4 locations, including their newest sports bar and restaurant in Bel Air. Pappas food, service, and atmosphere, second to none. Back to you, Richard.
Excellent job, Howard. Chris, you're up.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting appeal. I'll grant everybody that. And it'll be really interesting to see whether Trump gets sour as his appellate lawyer, he's good. I don't believe a lot of what he says, but the guy's good. He's the one who's handling the immunity case in DC, so I don't know if he can handle both at the same time. But on appeal, I don't see anything going anywhere on the unanimous instruction issue. There's no basis for that in New York law, which is the controlling law here. And let me give you an analogy. In a civil case, and it's the same concept, when you're trying to prove a cause of injury, the instruction is that you must prove that A, B, or C is a proximate cause of the injury. You don't have to specifically identify which one of the 3 things it was that caused the injury. And it's the same concept here in this situation with the multiple things that were at work here. So I don't see that argument getting legs. The legs argument that I would see is what we talked about earlier with Jerry about the unique bootstrapping of the underlying New York State misdemeanors being bootstrapped up to a felony by interfering with a presidential election. That is a case of first impression, and that's where an appeal is going to succeed or not succeed. And the last thing I'll say is this: watch out for this argument on appeal. Marchand excluded a defense expert on election issues in terms of the FEC issues that Nicolee was just mentioning. They wanted to call an expert on that, and that would have been a pretty darn good expert to pick up on what Nicolee was saying, because there is some legs to that. And excluding an expert witness is a big deal. So I would say that's probably the second strongest argument on appeal.
Jerry Rogers.
Well, I think Chris is exactly right on the judge's instructions. They were odd, but you're right. There, in terms of New York law, it wasn't illegal. It was odd, but not illegal. But I think you're right on the other 2 issues. I didn't mention the witness. The judge gave very strict parameters in terms of how he could testify, and therefore he didn't testify. I think you're right. But here's my thing, and that is, this, in my mind, has to do with due process, the rule of law, justice being blind. And, Jayne mentioned that, anyone should be able to face justice and be held accountable. And our legal system, that's what it's there for. You shouldn't be able to buy your way out of being held accountable. And I agree with that. The problem here is that this wasn't that. This was a political weaponized use of the legal system. And to me, whether you're Democrat or Republican, we don't want our legal system to be used in that manner. My hope is we don't see Republicans doing this now, because power will shift. And I don't want to see a politicized DOJ in a GOP administration or in the states. And so my thing is, how do we get back to normal again? And I think the way to get back to normal, right?
Really
I
good
think
question.
is I don't think we see normal again until 2028. But let me just say one last thing, and this is where it matters. The appeal doesn't matter politically. It'll happen later. He may get off, he may not. Who knows? We'll see. And I don't mean this as a pejorative. There are low information voters because they're busy with life, being a dad, being a soccer coach, doing volunteer work, etc. And so they really don't pay attention like we pay attention. And so after the headlines fail and fade and that sort of thing, what they're going to hear in September and October, November is convicted felon. And that's right. And that's how the Democrats succeeded here. They interfered with this election by getting that phrase into the public discussion. Convicted. This is election interference, in my view. Convicted felon won't go away.
All right, Jayne, I saw you nodding, and I'd like to turn the microphone over to you.
I agree with Jerry's observation of that. That's true. But what concerns me about this, everything about this, we're already very polarized. We're already very divided. we have a very difficult time getting voters interested to participate. We have very low turnout. We had horrible turnout in our recent primary election in Maryland. And I'm very concerned that going forward, I mean, Jerry mentioned that about low information voter. That's an interesting term about like not paying attention the way we're paying attention, et cetera.
And I didn't mean
very
it
concerned
wasn't
that
a
this is
knock.
just
I didn't mean
another
yeah.
reason not to participate.
Yeah. And I didn't
I
mean
mean,
that
it's not like,
as
oh,
a
I
knock.
got to go to the poll and vote for or against because of this. I don't see that.
Yeah.
I do.
Look, I
Anyway.
had a mentor, when I was first involved in policy and politics, and he said something to me once. He said, people in politics are stupid because they're smart. People pay attention to what they can change, how they can make a difference in their family's lives. So to Jayne's point, I think a lot of this will dissuade people from being involved and knowing the issues. And even in my own family, like, I'm a political guy. I have 5 kids. My kids don't want to hear any of this. I mean, this is my work. They don't want to hear anything about any of this. And my own kids are getting turned off. And I have 3 voters in my house. I have 3 older girls who are voters now, and they don't want anything to do with this. So Jayne, you're right. We're really putting the process in jeopardy.
Go ahead, Nicolee. I see you.
So I actually think this is very energizing to the Republican base. I actually think it is terrifying to a lot of independents and should be terrifying to moderate Democrats. Because once again, although we're talking about Trump because Trump was the name on trial, this is not about Trump. All those people that poll saying they care about saving democracy, this is what should terrify them the most about destroying our systems of government. That you can take what is an accusation of a misdemeanor and do 34 criminal counts with a rigged jury pool in a rigged jurisdiction. So these are just tremendously concerning things. I think it's very energizing to the Republican base. And quite frankly, most people probably view this as one of their lost opportunities to place a vote that actually matters. So sure, when you're talking about razor thin states like Wisconsin, I think this will have a tremendous impact. Interestingly enough, this does not seem to be rating on the scale at all of our country's like youthful voters. I don't think they have any faith left in our system. And I certainly think they enjoyed growing up under Donald Trump's economy instead of being unable to get a job or afford a Big Mac in Joe Biden's economy. So I think those are some long-term repercussions of this. But lastly, what has actually troubled me the most about the 2 New York cases is that in support of Joe Biden, the Democrats are essentially destroying the golden goose that has made America's economy. New York is the financial center of the world, and there is no sane, wealthy business owner who should stay in New York State right now because they cannot trust their court system. It is used to go after who's ever enemy on any given day. And I think Kevin O'Leary of Shark Tank said it best. So, if you're there for New York's financial markets, you need to move. If you're there because you're a business owner, you need to move.
Come to Baltimore.
You have to hope that wherever state you move to doesn't become like New York.
Come to Baltimore.
Not Baltimore, probably. Same sort of jury situation.
Richard. Yeah, Richard, what's interesting is that, the House and the Senate swing back and forth every now and then, as we've seen, just by a few votes. And I don't think anybody will ever get a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate ever again. And so in the last 10 years, the judiciary, the Article III courts, have become the new focus. And the person who focused most on them first was Mitch McConnell, who has worked very hard with the Federalist Society to find and put young conservative judges on the federal trial courts, the federal appeals courts, and on the Supreme Court. And Trump obviously put 3 on the Supreme Court. I'll go to my grave never relinquishing the point that McConnell stole one seat on the Supreme Court. There's an argument that he stole two. But the point is that while conservatives are arguing now about the politicization of trial courts in New York City, Democrats are arguing about the politicization of the Supreme Court itself. The same Supreme Court, which refused to take on the immunity case back in December, okay, when the special counsel asked them to, now suddenly wanted to grab hold of it in March, okay, because they knew by waiting until March, because it would come back to them, because the DC Circuit Court was going to issue an opinion. It was a fabulous opinion, one of the best federal appellate opinions I've ever read in 34 years of practicing law. But, and I'll wrap up here, the Supreme Court has sadly become politicized, and that needs to stop, because that court is a lot more important than the New York State Court.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. You guys have been terrific. Great conversation. Really, really good. Here's Howard once again, and we're going to extend our show by a few minutes because we have a lot of good stuff happening right now. Howard, go ahead.
Thank you, Rich. The way some people drive these days, auto accidents are on the rise. If your car has been in an accident, the insurance companies cannot tell you where to take your car to get fixed. That's why more and more people are trusting their auto repairs and auto maintenance to leading edge auto body and mechanical repair. They work on all makes and models. They pick up free. They deliver anywhere in the Baltimore area. So give them a call at 410-433-6433 or visit them at 5807 Falls Road in the heart of Mount Washington. They make your car look and run like new again. And Baltimore is one of the best diner towns in the country, and the most popular of them all are the Double T diners. TT means totally terrific. For breakfast, lunch, or dinner, the Double T menu offers you so many choices, you'll want to order everything. And with locations on Route 40 West, Perry Hall, White Marsh, Annapolis, Pasadena, and the EC Diner in Ellicott City. Plus, Monday nights are lobster nights at by the Docks in Middle River, all part of the Double T family. Back to you, Rich.
Okay, Howard. People have wondered and have been asking since the 34 convictions if Donald Trump is now disqualified to run for president. The answer is absolutely not. Under Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, there are only three qualifications that you need to be meeting for the presidency. You must be at least 35 years of age. Trump is older than that. Be a natural-born citizen and have lived in the United States for at least 14 years. Jayne, you might want to respond to Chris, but also, Jayne, let me ask you and all of you, how do you feel, if any way, these convictions will affect the outcome of the presidential election? Jayne, you want to start?
I'm not sure. As we sit here today, I don't know that it has any impact, but a lot of things can happen between now and November. I mean, at this point, I think it's like people who don't support Trump, they like the conviction. People who support Trump don't. I don't think it makes any difference. But as time goes on, I don't know what will happen. And the other thing is, yes, Richard, you're right. There's nothing in the Constitution that bars. There's also a lot of things that can happen on that front.
Right.
Because it's like the founders did not envision this, that a former president would be charged with a crime as he's running for another term as a former president. It's weird to begin with in that circumstance. And then you have this prosecution. I mean, I don't think the founders probably did not envision this scenario. So I don't know. As we sit here today, I think it's just very hard to say what impact this is going to have.
Jerry, what do you think, pal?
Well, I think in the short term, it helps Trump insofar as he raised lots of money, although his Truth Social took a $3 million hit in the stock market. I think initially it helps him. I think it will energize his base. I think the weaponization of the legal system is something that scares conservatives. And to Chris's point about undermining the Supreme Court or politicizing the Supreme Court, many on the right believe that the progressives have been purposefully undermining free speech, the Electoral College, the Supreme Court, the rule of law. And this is something that, and this is part of that. So it energizes the base. Long term, I think Jayne is right in so far as we're gonna have new headlines and different things. Bottom line for me is convicted felon. That is going to stay with him, and that's going to hurt him. And if Chris is right, razor thin in these 7 swing states, I think ultimately this hurts Trump.
Nicolee, let me ask you a question. But asking about Trump, didn't he once say that he thought he could either walk down Broadway or Fifth Avenue, shoot somebody, and get away with it? Didn't he say something like that, Nick?
You're welcome to go find the tape, but there was some comment about his popularity with certain people. But what I'd like to talk about is how much the Democrats have overplayed this lawfare hand. Every single time they have pushed this farther, Trump's poll numbers have gone up because you see people that feel it could be them, that it's the system going after them. And I think there are so many news cycles. Totally agree with Jayne on that from now until election season, as we now call it. But I do not think this bodes well for the Democrats. And for all of the people who have ever felt mistreated by the justice system, I can't fathom a single one of those people not voting for Trump just as a sign of protest against the system. And then secondly, from a political strategy, this is so overt, it's ridiculous. The one thing you don't have more of, that you can't buy more of, is time in a political campaign. And so it's really obvious with this lawfare strategy, the Democrats were just trying to take Trump off the playing field because Biden obviously can't campaign. You know, he had a basement campaign in 2020, and this time he's, got a lid every single day at 9:30 in the morning, if he even ever surfaces. And he can't campaign. So they're just trying to take Trump off the field by using up his time. But so far, it's been backfiring every single step. But obviously, we'll have to see what the results are this fall.
All right, we need to come to somewhat of a conclusion here. So let's just sort of go around the horn. And you guys let me know. Nicolee, we just lost your picture. Let us know how you feel this is going to affect the election, if at all. And let's start out with Chris Kennedy and try to keep it to 30 to 40 seconds because we're going to end up being on the air for 3 days. Go ahead, Chris.
Sure. And in terms of taking people off the playing field, I'm glad the Republicans didn't try to take Joe Biden off the playing field by going after Hunter Biden. I'm glad that never happened. And if there are any Biden trials coming up soon, oh, that's right. There's one coming up in a couple of weeks. Well, let's see what happens with that. But I think at the end of the day, the only takeaway that's going to matter is that phrase convicted felon that Jerry pointed out, because it is a rinse and repeat, microwave, quick news cycle society that we're in. And a lot of people don't like to pay attention to details outside the beltway. They just don't. And so I'll just say this. I think it might make a small difference in some of his base. Whether it's enough to make a difference in these razor thin battleground states, I don't know. And the final takeaway fact here, Richard, which is a fun fact to finish up with, is that convicted felons by law are not allowed to work in the West Wing, but their boss is allowed to work in the West Wing if he's a convicted felon.
Gary, briefly.
Well, I think Chris makes the point as to why the Democrats went after Trump in this way. Convicted felon, convicted felon, convicted felon. This is going to be the mantra moving forward. I think if Trump is able to discipline himself, and he can't, so maybe what I'm saying is moot. If this election's on the economy, if it's on energy, if it's on the cost of groceries, etc., I think the Republicans will do very well. If this election is going to be about a convicted felon in the West Wing and you can't hire convicted felons in the West Wing, I think Trump's in big trouble. But just as a side note, though, it's Biden's Justice Department that's going after Hunter, not Republicans.
Jayne Miller.
How about that?
I agree with Jerry. I mean, I just think it's too early to tell now what impact this might have, that we start to see if there is erosion in support because of the convicted felon label. And I also agree that, there's, when I've done these candidate forums, et cetera, on the local and Senate race in Maryland, I mean, the economy and inflation are very high at the top, the top of the list. So, that's not going away. Does not appear to go away.
And let's conclude with our GOP National Committee woman, a standout on Square Off, who's been here for many a year. Ladies and gentlemen, concluding remark from Nicolee Ambrose.
I just think this is a really sad state of affairs for America. I think it's embarrassing for the US on the world stage. I think Vladimir Putin and President Xi are going to bed laughing that their greatest enemy is completely self-destructing from within. And I worry, right? Since Pandora's box is opened, it can't be fixed. I don't want to live in a country where political parties, for the sake of fun and political exercise, persecute their political opponents. And I'm concerned that is the situation we are now in. So I hope for a better day for America, but I don't know how we get there.
All right. One way is to continue to watch Square Off. Here at squareoff.net, we'd like very much to hear from you. Just go to our website, squareoff.net, click on the tab that says you can write to us. We'd like to hear from you. Really, I'd like to read some of your comments next week on our next week's program. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Nicolee. Thank you, Miss Jayne. We'll listen to you on the radio on Saturday. Jerry, you on Sunday. Chris Kelly, see you in court. Thank you all so much for our extended special on the Trump convictions. And we'll see you next time when once again we square off. Bye-bye. Be safe.